you know how to create user-defined panels, dialog boxes, and other objects such as user-defined fields and buttons. Other considerations for your user-defined objects are resizing and anchoring. When you resize a panel, it will give you more space to add additional user-defined fields. Resizing and anchoring is also used to maintain the perspective of the panel. You will notice on this sales order entry form there are a number of custom objects. The New button at the top of the frame, the down arrow button at the bottom of the frame, and the Contract tab. Now notice what happens if I expand my Sales Order Entry tab. You can see that the New button and the down arrow button are staying in a fixed position, where the other buttons that are programmed with the system are moving to size with the form. This is one of the considerations that you need to think about if you do a custom item. So let's look at this down arrow, and we want it to be able to move and keep proportion to the accept. So I could of course enter Customizer from here if I was customizing only for this company, which I am, or I can go to Custom Office and go to Customizer Selection. I already have a few custom panels in the works, and the one I want to modify is this one. So I'm going to go to the main panel, and here's my new button. And if I look at the options and look that it says Resize and Anchored, and notice that the resize is fixed and the anchored is top left. It can be very helpful to look at an existing button for its properties. So if I look at my copy from and I look at the options, I see that it is fixed but is top right. So that's quite different than my button. So let's change that. Now I also want to make sure that the arrow changes. So let's see how the Accept button is configured. And it is fixed but bottom right. So let's make sure that this is going to move appropriately with the other buttons, fixed, bottom right. And let's see what that has done. We'll update their panels. And we'll go back into Sales Order and bring an order in, and let's see what happens now when we resize our panels. And you can see that as we change the size of our form, the New button and the arrow button are resizing as well. Well, there's another consideration that you need to make if you use a custom dialog box. And this New button actually launches a dialog box. If I go ahead there, and you can see that I have 3 UDFs on this dialog box. But let's say that you have 10 UDFs, 10 custom fields that you'd like to see on a dialog box. Well, you want to make sure that you have enough room for them. So we're going to go back into Customizer. This time I'll go through the Customizer here. Here's the one that I modified. And it's not this panel that I want, but it's the main panel. It's actually the dialog box that I want to configure. So I'm going to go to the dialog box. And if I go to the panel header definition button under Tools and go to the position and size, we see that this sizing currently is fixed. And any new dialog box you create defaults to being fixed. But I want to be able to resize it. So I'm going to select Resizable and say OK. And we'll go ahead and save that. And go back to Sales Order to find our change. Now when I bring in an order and open up this new button, notice that it does have the ability to resize. Now another thing that you might want to think about is the positioning of your user-defined fields. And in this one, I'm going to leave this as is, but remember the concept will apply here because I have a Contract tab that I created. So this is a user-defined tab, and you'll notice that I have some user-defined fields on it. And what happens when I resize? Notice that they stay fixed. And I may want to maintain the perspective of these fields just like I did with those buttons. So let's see how that's done. And let's go to Customizer again. And I need to go to my contract panel. So in order to position these accordingly, you just need to think about where you want them to be. So here is my field for my name, and as far as the options, you can see it can be fixed or auto-sized. I'm going to leave it fixed. And then where do I want to anchor it? By default it's going to the top left, but I actually want this to go to the top right. And I'll do the same thing with the name field so that it moves along. And I'll continue to do my fields so that when a frame is resized, the fields will move along with it and keep that perspective. I'm not going to do all of these so you can actually see what happens. But there's one additional attribute I want to show you, which is the ability to center. So if you want to have an item and as you resize it, it stays centered, you have that capability as well. So I can still keep the size fixed, and you can see that I can go ahead and center it. And I'll go ahead and center this text as well. And we're going to leave the right alone, but as you can see, if I select an object, I still have those same opportunities. Does it resize automatically, or is it going to keep the same size? And then where do I want to anchor at? Okay, so now we've got our custom tab configured, and we'll save that. And let's update the panels. And now let's see what our sales order entry form looks like now. So as I go to my contract tab and I expand it, you can see that my 3 fields in the upper right hand corner are moving, my centered field is moving, but my right field is not, because it's not been configured, and now the center is starting to overlap it. So as you create your custom objects, consider the fact that if somebody does resize the panels, how do you want the items to display? Let's look now at fixing the user-defined fields that we have in the right-hand corner. So back into Customizer, selecting the customization that I want to work on. And I want to come to my new panel and edit it. And this time, let's select that right frame and look at what happens if we set it to auto, so that when we resize, that should automatically modify and change. So we'll save it, update our panels, and let's go back into sales order. We'll bring up an order, go to the contract tab and resize it, and notice how that frame in the lower right hand corner has resized based on the size of the window. So if I change it, automatically resizing. And this shows you what resizing and anchoring is all about and how it can affect your forms.